So from health to employment regulation, now we move to school reform or education reform. So how social policy intervened in the social sector of related to education in the Great Britain in 19th century. Until the middle of 19th century, education was a privilege of only the very rich or upper middle classes. There were no schools, so children were educated at home. The few schools which came up after the middle of 19th century were related to churches or charities, but they were too few in number. So the most significant act which started the social policy related to education in Great Britain was the Education Act of 1870, which established local school boards. But the catch was that these local school boards were not in all areas, only in those areas where they were needed. Then Elementary School Act of 1880 was the first one to make education compulsory. So for every 5 to 10-year-old had to go to school. So this was again a landmark achievement. Of course, there was, like in other areas, there was opposition to state intervention. There was this idea that if children were going to study, there was a threat to social order. There will be increase in poverty as children will not be working. Then, of course, there were religious divisions. So different religious denominations like Anglicans, Catholics, they didn't want to study in the school, and as they couldn't agree on the curriculum related to religious studies. The 1891 Elementary Education Act made education free. So this was again a new thing. Previously, parents or charities paid for children's education. The 1893 Act raised the school leaving age from 10 to 11, and then in 1899 it was raised to 12 and later to 13 years of age. The Voluntary Schools Act of 1897 and Balfour Act 1902 provided grants to elementary schools. So schools were not, of course, the children were not paying fees. So where did the cost of schools came from? So it came from the government. Government decided to pay for not only the running costs but also the capital costs. The Fisher Education Act of 1918 made secondary education compulsory. So previously it was only the primary education, but later on secondary education was also compulsory, and the school leaving age was raised to 14. The 1944 Act resolved the issue of religious schools, as large number of Anglican schools were absorbed as state schools, and Catholics which didn't want to be absorbed, they were given the option of remaining independent and free, but their capital costs will be covered only in half as compared to Anglican state schools.